Michael, what does a typical day look like for you? And how do you get everything done? I used to have a fairly rigid schedule. Isabella has taken over that job. She gets paid for that. She enjoys doing that. I used to go to the office first thing in the morning. I woke up and right to the office with a cup of coffee. Monday is my planning day, meaning that on Monday, I would plan out the rest of the week. And I've come to realize, it's not going to work for me. It's too stressful at the end of the day. I want to enjoy every single thing that I do. A meal, very high in protein. I always have a lot of protein, but then also carbohydrates. That's what I then have for dinner. And it doesn't follow a rigid schedule. But generally speaking, I do CrossFit 2 to 3 times a week. In the afternoon, I'm going to go into the sauna. And likely I'm going to jump into the cold plunge as well, just as a recovery. It makes me happy. And if the sun happens to be shining as well, I take off my shirt so I get my sun exposure. Then there are obviously, random activities that at the end of the day, fill in the gaps of my exercise routine.
You're listening to the Primal Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kummer, and my goal is to help you achieve optimal health by bridging the gap between ancestral living and the demands of modern society. Get ready to unlock the transformative power of nature as the ultimate biohack, revolutionizing your health and reconnecting you with your primal self.
One company that's bridging the gap between skincare and skin health is our sponsor, OneSkin. I've been using the topical supplements for the face and body, and I was quite impressed with the improvements in my skin's appearance. Their OS01 peptide is scientifically proven to target cellular aging, helping your skin look, feel, and behave as if it was younger. As a listener, you'll get 15% off your first OneSkin purchase with code MKUMMER at oneskin.co. That's oneskin.co. And now let's get back to the episode. Michael, what does a typical day look like for you? And how do you get everything done, including blogging and podcasting and raising animals for food, homeschooling and exercising and running a supplements business? Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Primal Shift Podcast, in which I'll share with you what a typical day, if there is such a thing, looks like for me, including my morning routine, my exercise and wellness routine, meal timing, as well as my work schedule, like the stuff that, makes money, like recording this podcast here. Now, I should say that I used to have a fairly rigid schedule in the past until I figured out that rigidity ain't working for me. Now I follow more of a framework where, I know that I have certain tasks that I would like to get done, that I love doing, and that have to get done, but within a certain time frame, and that time frame enjoys some flexibility. It could be a day, could be a week, could be a month, whatever. So I try to allow some flexibility there that allows me to get the stuff done, but at the same time, keep my stress levels low and don't, be just chasing to-dos and be stressed out all the time. And also it allows me to, account for stuff that I hadn't planned. Like, for example, the flooding of our rabbit hutch the other day. So whenever that happens, stuff like that happens, and I suddenly need to take a day off, to do something very important, like, get all the water out and figure out a way that, rabbits don't flood anymore, then, that needs to be taken into account because that pushes everything else back. So let's start with my morning routine, how that looks like. And I typically wake up between 5:30 and 7:30. Now I know that's 2 hours. That's a long time. And obviously that doesn't mean that one day I wake up at 5:30 and then the next day at 7:30. I have a fairly consistent sleep and wake time, but that sleep and wake time changes with the season. So depending on the availability of light, so if it's light for longer in the evening, I might go to bed a little later. I might wake up a little later. It depends on how I feel. Right now, I get up between 5:30 and 6 usually within that 30-minute time frame. But there was a time just a couple of months ago where I would sleep in until 7 or even 7:30 because my body needed it. I felt best doing that way. Now I feel better getting up earlier. But, roughly between 5:30 and 7:30 is when I get up on a given day. Usually after I get up, get dressed, and do one of a couple of things. Often I grab a cup of coffee, either just black or with cream, and I walk the dog. I actually started doing this first thing in the morning to get out, especially now in winter, while I'm recording this, it's pitch black outside, and I've really come to enjoy walking the dog in the dark. And it's a different experience. Your senses work differently because it's pitch black. You need to rely more on your ears, maybe your smell, and you really need to focus on what's in front of you so you don't trip. So that's typically what I do first thing in the morning. And the advantage of doing this is over just, going to the computer or picking up my phone immediately. or starting to work, generally speaking, is that I get time to, sort my mind, to sort my thoughts, to be in nature already, to have, the dog taken care of. I know that he already had his walk. So, once I come back, I can worry about other things and I don't have to think about, I need to walk the dog too. And then when I come back, I typically see if Isabella, our 10-year-old daughter, needs help with the morning chores. I used to do the morning chores, meaning go down, make sure the animals have food, water, everyone is healthy, everyone is taken care of, do like a whole, 30-minute kind of routine to make sure that all our livestock is doing well. Isabella has taken over that job. She gets paid for that. She enjoys doing that. And she, gets to invest half of what she earns into exchange-traded funds at the age of 10 already. And I absolutely love that. And I have less work. So I really like it. But, occasionally, she needs help. I see what she needs, answer any questions, whatever. Maybe it's some, go down with her. But usually she takes care of that. Then I go brush my teeth and I try to do this in a deep squat. And I know this sounds funny, but, if you have a lot going on like I do, I try to squeeze in as much productivity as I possibly can. And mobility work, I've mentioned it in previous episodes, is one of the things that I want to pay more attention to. But sometimes, or very often, it's just not high enough on my priority list, unfortunately, and it gets pushed away. But by figuring out how I can work mobility into my daily routine, like while I'm brushing my teeth for 2 minutes, I'm in a deep squat, I rock back and forth, it opens the hips, it stretches my ankles, and my Achilles tendon and, everything, all the little muscles down there. So I already get some mobility work in, not first thing in the morning, but relatively early in the morning. And I don't have to spend any extra time on it. And I actually feel great after getting up. I'm loose. I feel just so much better. If you combine the walking and the deep squatting in the morning, you just feel much, much better, especially on days then when I go work out. Then it's time for a potty break and I either get ready for the gym or I go to the office, and after that, I have breakfast with the rest of the gang. We all sit together, enjoy breakfast, talk about what's going to happen, if we need to, assist each other, whatever, help each other during the day. And that's it. I used to go to the office first thing in the morning. I woke up and right to the office with a cup of coffee to start working, to get as much done before everyone else got up. And I realized that actually I was productive, don't get me wrong, but it negatively impacted my stress level. And so I feel much better not being stressed first thing in the morning by work, by comments, by emails, whatever, but just going for a walk and doing some other things. And it's been an absolute game changer and I love it. Speaking of work, obviously, I like working, I love working, and I need to work. And so the way I've structured my work schedule is that I have certain days where I try to do certain things that are associated with blogging, with the supplements business, with the Kummer Homestead, channel and outlets and the blog, etc. And I used to, and this is maybe another nugget that hopefully you can consider and take into account, depending on how you structure your workload, even though, yours might look completely different than mine. But I used to take Monday as my planning day, meaning that on Monday, I would plan out the rest of the week. I would maybe outline my blog posts, my YouTube videos, my podcast episodes, whatever I wanted to, record, write, etc. during the week. I would take care on Monday. I would go through my photos, organize everything, see what, some of my, my video editor or my general editor, would need, for blog posts, for videos, etc. I would organize everything. I would organize my tasks, everything I had to do. And I've realized that there was so much organizational stuff going on, so much planning going on, that I often then didn't get to other things like responding to emails, like responding to comments. There was just a lot going on Monday. And I felt really, really stressed by the end of the day, especially on those days where I didn't get my stuff done. Like, I went through a lot of my tasks, but then I still had 20 tasks on my to-do list that I didn't even get to take a look at, until it was dinner time. And that really frustrated me. And I realized that, doing all of that work on Monday and setting the tone for the rest of the week is just a bad idea. So I switched everything around. And now I'm doing my planning on Friday and preload some of my work. Like, today is Monday and I'm going to record this podcast episode. So Monday have become my podcast recording episodes. And I really keep it low key and low stress. I record the podcast. I do some administrative work. I respond to emails, and that's pretty much it. That's my Monday. So Monday is the easiest day of the week now. And I really like this because, again, it sets the tone for the rest of the week. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are usually my writing days, meaning that I write new blog posts for the blog, I update old ones, I restructure old ones, whatever it takes, and I usually spend a couple of hours a day on doing that, both for my main blog, michaelkummer.com, as well as for the kummerhomestead.com. So I, maybe spend 3, maybe 4 hours tops on writing blog content on those 2 days respectively. On Thursday is my video recording day. That includes, the long form videos for my main channel, for the Kummer Homesteading channel, and, shorts and Instagram Reels, etc. So all of that stuff happens on Thursday. And I usually try to record 1 or 2 videos. I used to really stuff, those days full of content. And I've come to realize, it's not going to work for me. It's too stressful at the end of the day. I want to enjoy every single thing that I do. And I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, now I have to. I never want to have that have to feeling. I always try to stay in the want to, And that's not always easy, but at least that's what I try. And on the weekends, that's usually reserved for homesteading, chores, like, building new structures, doing something, that takes a lot of time with the animals, whatever it is, typically outdoor stuff, gardening, taking care of any emergencies that, I didn't get to during the week that need to get done. But otherwise, it's very much family time. Meal timing wise, I typically eat 2 meals a day. That's what I feel pretty good with, meaning that I have breakfast, usually around 10 a.m. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later. Sometimes it's, more like lunch than breakfast. But around 10 a.m. is on average when I have my first meal, and that often coincides with either a post-workout or, getting my first bout of, work done in the office, and then I go out and we all have family, and we all have breakfast together. And my first meal is typically very high in protein and fat, and I usually don't have carbs in the morning. Reason being that without carbs, my energy levels remain incredibly stable. There are some exceptions when I have incredibly intense workouts where I depleted, a lot of my glycogen. I might have some carbs in the form of, raw honey, either with breakfast or very often then, later in the early afternoon. So if I feel like, at like 1 p.m. or so, or 2 p.m., feel like, okay, now I feel like, my body has run out of glycogen and it's starting to, gluconeogenesis is starting to kick in and it's not going as fast as I want it to, I might have some carbs there. But usually morning is protein and fat. And then in the evening for dinner, which is typically between 5 and 6, again, sometimes earlier, like yesterday we went to a restaurant, we ate out and we had our reservation at 4:15. We were actually back by 6. And sometimes it's a little later. If we come home late, whatever, but between 5 and 6 usually, it's a meal, very high in protein. I always have a lot of protein, but then also carbohydrates. That's what I then have for dinner. I don't really snack in between. I mean, occasionally I do, and I notice it. Most of my snacking stems from stress and anxiety. So if I have a very stressful day, I feel like I need to eat something in the afternoon. And whenever I realize that, I'm like, again, that stress, it's time to de-stress. It's time to do something. And instead of just going and then having something that, we don't really have anything at home that I shouldn't be having. But I've noticed that by just getting a boiled egg and, dunking it in salt and having that, the combination of salt and the protein and the fat of the egg takes care of any craving. And it's actually an incredibly healthy snack. It's again, protein and fat with the salt. I think that really helps to take the edge off. And that's what I would recommend, if you have those afternoon cravings or whatever, cook, 10 hard-boiled eggs, ahead of time, keep them in the fridge, and then have 1 or 2. The other day I had 2 and some extra, bacon with it, and that took care of my, afternoon snack. But usually 2 meals a day. In terms of exercise and wellness routine, I used to have actually right next to me, you can see it in the frame, but it's right next to me, I have a whiteboard, and on it I had like all of the things, the wellness routines that I wanted to get done within a week, including, CrossFit, cold plunging, sauna bathing, stretching, my Rehit exercise bike that I have in the basement, the Carol bike, and that I have reviewed. And I had all of those things on the list. And I'm like, okay, and I had like a goal of, 57 minutes of sauna, 11 minutes of cold plunge accumulated, 60 minutes of or 90 minutes of workout, whatever, 60 minutes of stretching in a week. And I realized also that by having this rigid kind of routine, it was stressful because I was chasing after checking off those things. And I'm like, no, I don't do this anymore. So now my exercise routine and wellness routine is very much not random, but there's a certain randomness to it, and it doesn't follow a rigid schedule. But generally speaking, I do CrossFit 2 to 3 times a week based on how I feel, meaning that, I decide in the morning, usually, if I want to go workout or if I don't. And my work schedule obviously influences that as well. So how I feel and what I want to get done on a certain day, that determines if I go workout or not. One thing that's relatively consistent is my walking routine. So I walk the dog twice a day for 45 minutes each, typically in the morning and in the afternoon. I mentioned, I've started doing this first thing in the morning while it's still dark, at least in winter, and then in the afternoon again. And for me, that's a mental break. It's exercise, obviously. It's a very low impact exercise. I've come to realize that by just going for a walk, I'm burning 250 calories, and I get my every day I get like 12,000 steps or whatever in total. And I mean, it's not that I only walk and then I sit for the rest of the day. I'm fairly active throughout the day, but those 2 walks have been a game changer in terms of my exercise routine, my movement routine, and my sanity, because I have time to think and decompress. And sometimes when I feel like, today was really a day I wanted to do CrossFit, I wanted to push it a little bit, but I didn't get the chance for whatever reason, I put on body armor. I have a vest that happens to weigh around 20 pounds. So it's technically body armor, but it's also like a weight vest, if you will. And I just wear that and walk the dog, So it's, and it goes up and down, so I burn extra calories because it's extra effort. Sometimes, I run a little bit with that vest, I maybe do some sprints in between, then walk again. But it's amps up, the ante a little bit without being too intense on my joints. Sauna and cold plunging, I really do it based on how I feel. If I feel like, like today, for example, I just did a workout this morning and I'm absolutely crushed. In the afternoon, I'm going to go into the sauna, and likely I'm going to jump into the cold plunge as well, just as a recovery mechanism, as a recovery method. But otherwise, I don't have a fixed schedule. I try to roughly get to the 57 minutes of sauna bathing and, the cold plunging 11-ish minutes or so. But if I don't get to it in a week at all, I'm perfectly fine with that. I know I have it, and I do it as I feel and based on how my body, responds to those stressors at the end of the day. Stretching is also another thing that I try to do as much as I can, again, starting with, the deep squatting in the morning while brushing my teeth. My goal is to do some mobility work every day, but realistically, it's 2 to 3 times a week, very often together with my wife, because we've both the same, program or app that we use. And it's definitely something that I want to focus more on. I've mentioned this in previous episodes because mobility, as you age, declines, especially if you maintain a relatively intense workout regimen. I lift heavy weights. I do a lot of high intensity stuff, relatively speaking. And so mobility is important, to be able to move without pain. As far as my brain breaks go, sometimes, even though I, walk the dog in the morning, but then I might sit in the office for an extended period, but I try to at least once or twice a day where I go out in the backyard, I check and on the animals or just watch them, just sit down again, maybe in a deep squat and just watch what they are doing. And it's soothing. It's fun. It makes me happy. And if the sun happens to be shining as well, I take off my shirt so I get my sun exposure. I get my dose of, animal cuteness. And that's really an important factor and an important part of, maintaining my mental health and maintaining my sanity at the end of the day, because my day is typically packed with a lot of things. And by doing that, by getting out, by disconnecting, by getting into nature at the end of the day, by, having animals around you who are not stressed, who just do what they do because they like it, and it's just a beautiful thing. And you might not have animals at home to do this, but just getting out and, observing, nature, observing the birds, observing, whatever, I always, stop when I see geese flying overhead and I'm like, and I just watch, how majestic they are. I mean, you see animals around you, I suppose. And so even if you don't have your own animals, just go outside, and take a few minutes, a couple of times a day and do this. And I guarantee you it's going to help you stay sane and disconnect and lower your stress levels. Then there are obviously, random activities that at the end of the day, fill in the gaps of my exercise routine, or said differently, allows me to not go to the gym every single day because I do those things like carrying feedbacks. Every so often, we get a shipment of, maybe 5, 6, 50-pound bags, and guess what? I pick them up one by one, or even sometimes two, and I bring them from the front of the house to the back, or I have to put them into the respective container, shoveling dirt. I don't know how often we've been shoveling dirt and wood chips and stuff. And all of those things really, add to my fitness routine and allow me to not go to the gym every single day. And that's really my goal after all with health and wellness, to live in an environment, to set yourself up in an environment that's conducive to just movement, just exercise, without you having to take time out of your day to go to the gym. Ultimately, I only do CrossFit because, to compensate for the things that I don't get to do on a daily basis, because my main job is to sit in front of a computer, But the more I can do things outside, the less I feel like I have to work out. And, just based on how I feel, how I look, how my physique is, how I perform in the gym, it seems to be working beautifully, So, evening routine then. We've done a lot of stuff during the day already. Now, what's happening in the evening? Well, one of the things we do is, collect eggs. That's, again, another opportunity to get out, interact with animals, observe animals, maybe go with the kids, go with the wife, just do a round in the evening, check, everything is good, collect eggs, and be happy that we have food that we, grew to eat the next morning. Then we have dinner, usually all together as well. We try to have every meal as much as possible, together as a family. And fortunately, our kids are homeschooled. Both my wife and I are home, so we have that opportunity and we appreciate and enjoy that. We feed the dog, that's also, now it's finally time for him to eat. He only eats once a day, a lot, though. He eats like 3 pounds, 3 ounces of raw meat, bones and organs and eggs, egg yolks. And so we feed him. We get the geese in. Usually we do that when we go down and do our evening round. We get the geese in for the night, so they're, safe and secure and, not going to be attacked by a raccoon or something. We get the kids ready for bed, including reading a book and, answering questions, talking to them, hearing what they have to say, what their fears and what have you, what's, stressed them out, what they've been playing, etc. And then, I sit down with Kathy on the couch with a cup of tea and we talk, or we watch, an episode of our, then favorite show, whatever that might be. And then we go to bed, usually around 9 p.m. Again, sometimes it's more like 8:30, sometimes it's more like 9:30, but usually between 8:30 and 9:30, we are in bed. If we go earlier, we read a book. Kathy really reads almost every night. I read if I'm not tired enough and if we go to bed early. If it's already 9 when we go to bed, I don't read. I prefer getting my sleep. And so I catch up on reading during the day. But then, lights out at roughly 9 p.m. Some of the other things that, we do throughout the day that just, are just part of being in a family setting is, assist the kids with stuff related to homeschooling, answering questions. And if they have issues with, their math or whatever they are doing, we unschool really. It's not really homeschooling, so we don't have a set curriculum, but we do have a certain, like math, for example, we follow a certain, math curriculum to make sure we cover all the bases. But beyond that, they very much do what they want, in terms of projects, in terms of learning new things, and we just assist. So whenever they come to us and say, hey, how does, how do dinosaurs turn to fossils, So then we go and, get books, see if we can find documentaries or, YouTube videos or what have you to help them, figure out what's going on. I assist, obviously then, I work with Kathy, on anything parenting related, on, homeschooling and travel planning, etc. We need to pick up raw milk, and then sometimes groceries, depending on what we need. Respond to emails and comments, bookkeeping, just the regular administrative things, making sure we have enough, supplements in our warehouse so we can, fulfill orders, etc. So all of that stuff, gets weaved in between, typically around my, writing and recording block. So either before or after. The constant battle really in terms of maintaining that schedule and making it so that I really enjoy what I'm doing is to figure out and decide what not to do. It's obviously important to decide what I want to do, But very often, the more challenging aspect is deciding what not to do, because I truly believe that productivity is about all the things that you don't do. Everything is shiny, everything is interesting or seems interesting at first, and there are like 1,000 things that I could do more than what I do. But realistically, it's not going to happen. I don't have the time, so I really need to decide what is it that I want to do, most importantly. Second, what is the return on invest, either, emotionally, financially, or whatever the case might be? What is mission critical, to maintain, business and, everything that we have here, to maintain the, make sure our animals are happy, etc. And then reduce all the tasks that don't fall into either of those categories. So anything that's like nice to have, that's like, yes, we could, but not really, is what keeps me sane. And that has really been a lesson that it took me a while to learn, to not do most of the things that are presented to me. Especially in the business world, you get emails every day, and emails are really someone else's to-do list that they put on your desk. And if I get an email from someone, they want me to do something, and I didn't ask for the task. So I really have to be cautious in when I respond to emails, how I respond, if I respond at all, and if I want to make this part of or add this to my to-do list. And by learning to not do most of the things, I have a much easier life. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I hope you learned something. I always find it interesting, when I learn more about how other people do things, how they get stuff done, sometimes I wonder, how is it possible that you get all of this stuff done in only 24 hours that each day has? And so, I'm hoping that by sharing some of the things that I do and how I do it, that, you can maybe apply some of that to yourself, to maybe streamline some of the things that you do, to maybe do some things differently, to be more productive, happier, and to pick more of the things that you really want to do versus the ones that you think like you have to do. And with that, again, we're going to wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.